Luckily for the Athenians, if you put in the actual aftermath, Miltiades, the general commander of Athens at the time, decided that the best way to deal with this would indeed be to march the Athenian army out and meet the Persians at Marathon head on. And he seems to have won. A simple order was taken, or was given: take provisions and march. Now, within this, in this case, with regard to the forces that Miltiades would have taken with him, we seem to have a general consensus. 9,000 to 10,000 Athenian hoplites, just that simple. It makes sense given that later on, about 11 years afterwards at the Battle of Plataea, this is the exact contingent that the Athenians seem to have sent. It also would correspond to the comprehensive hoplite force that the Athenians could provide at the time. However, and this is a distinction, this is not representative of the totality of Athenian armed forces. Indeed, Van Wies, a Dutch scholar, has ascertained that at this point in time there are more than 35,000 men in Athens which are of military age. These, 15,000 would have remained in Athens in case, of course, or for the protection of the city. And to these, we might even add some 4,000 settlers from Chalkis in Euboea that went on the route to support Eretria, but however found themselves all the way back in Athens. So the whole notion that Athens is unprotected while Marathon is taking place is not exactly accurate or true. Now, very briefly, because you guys have probably seen them in all their glory, I'm just going to place very small emphasis on the actual Greek hoplites that would have marched over to Marathon. The hoplite takes its name, of course, from its characteristic shield. 3 feet in diameter, wooden insert, bronze covered all throughout. It's also in some cases referred to as an aspis. It's made out of plywood, bronze plates, rims, and moss. The inside is covered with leather. But quite importantly, and this is very important for the wider scheme of things, it uses the Argyle grip. You guys can see exactly how the Argyle grip is. There is a forearm support right smack transcending the middle of the shield itself, and another handle down at the very end, which gives you a tremendous easiness of movement, regardless of what type, either offensive or defensive, that you might want to use your shield for. It is primarily indeed defensive, but you do not want to be hitting one of those things. It is very effective, especially for the usual hold, push, and shove type of technique or fighting method that the Athenians would have used at the time. Armor. Bronze breastplate or cuirass, as you guys can see some of the examples there. Big importance is the fact that this is the armor that only the higher, if you like, members or the richest, wealthier classes within Athens would have worn at the time. It's typical of the time that each and every soldier, when reporting for active duty, would have to provide or furnish his own armor. As a result, you see a great variation in their size, in their decoration, their fastening method, which is rather interesting, and of course their weight itself. These are referred to as the promachoi, the first in line of battle, or protostates, who stand in front. Bronze greaves, protecting of course the shins from the ankle all the way up to the knee. They're very popular at this point in time. Later on they tend to drop out of the equation, although not universally. And last but not least, bronze helmets of either the Corinthian, Plataean, Scythian, and Illyrian type. Another, though, and very important and often misunderstood, part of the defensive armor would have been the one that you see right over there. This guy's is a linen cuirass. This is essentially a so-called linothorax. And for the Athenian hoplites that would have marched to Marathon, this would be very popular. This would be actually worn by the majority of troops that showed up at Marathon. If you ask me about, or ask anyone about its actual method of construction, it's still under debate. Although, in some way, it might be a combination of laminated layers of linen, all around, adhesed or glued together in order to provide what was a remarkably stiff, but at the same time easy to produce, easy to manufacture, cheaper variant of any sort of metal armor. As you can see, we have mention of it within the ancient Homeric epic, continues in use down to the end of the Hellenistic age. Most Macedonian soldiers that took part in Alexander's campaign would have worn those particular suits of armor. Helmets, the Corinthian, far left, the Illyrian, the open-faced one, The Chalkidian, which is essentially a variation of the Corinthian that you see over there. And last but not least, the Thracian, characteristic Thracian or Scythian helmet, which I like to call the Smurf helmet. You guys can understand exactly why. Now, if these represent part or core of the Athenian army, these are usually the forgotten or unsung heroes. Because it's fine to have the front rankers being clad in bronze, you'll fine to have like the back, in this case for the middle rankers, having the hemothorax, but that is what the rest of them would have worn. These are indeed the gymnites. These are the guys that are the peasant militia, the peasant farmer citizens of Athens. And as you can see, the only thing that they would have with them is nothing more than, again, the characteristic oplon, a thrusting spear, a Boeotian type helmet, which in fact Xenophon, although it's a little bit out of context, but Xenophon describes as being particularly effective to be able to bring over to the lower classes, and therefore the poor elements of society, and that's basically it. If these guys can have a tunic, that actually is a sign of promise. Now, the Athenian hoplite, the two primary weapons that he would have is the spear, the so-called dori, usually at a length between 7 and 10 feet long. At the very tip, a sharp bronze, at the very bottom, a sharp bronze counterweight. It's called a savrotir, which basically means a lizard killer. That's what the Athenians and the rest of the Greek hoplites did when they got bored. They just killed lizards on the ground. But trust me, that thing itself is remarkably vicious if you aim it at an enemy. And at the same time, the short sword or the xiphos, this again, last-ditch variety defense. If your shield is gone, if your spear is gone, that's what you use, or you basically pray to God or take your own life. The Athenian short sword, have in mind 20-25 inches. The Spartan short sword would never measure more than 14 inches. They seem, because obviously size matters, so they seem to have always been like the end of a joke for the Athenians. Look at you guys, you have such tiny daggers. The Spartans would obviously reply, they're enough to thrust through or to cut through the hearts of our enemies. And they definitely have a point. So, going back, of course, to Marathon, once the Athenians decided to march up there, they were, and this of course credit must go to the inside of Miltiades, immediately capable of blocking any sort of exodus for the Persians. If you guys notice where the Persian army in this case seems to have been located, Miltiades immediately chose the road, which you can see over here, to Athens, and decided to set up his base near the area of Heraclea. That indeed, credit must go over to Professor Vanderpoel for being able, and I think convincingly, of ascertaining that this is where the Athenians set camp. Now the good thing about this, not only did it block the Persian exit towards Athens in this case, we can already see the marshes, and what the marshes would not basically do, the Athenians made sure that they blocked through the use of continuous stakes at a 45-degree angle so that the Persians cannot go through. At the same time, they managed, Miltiades' forces, to basically also take control of the other axis outside of Marathon, all throughout the Adriatic, the Kotroni, and the Stavroporaki hills, and therefore, as I said, barring any exit. The Persians, despite the fact that they pick an awesome site to disembark the troops, are now decisively pinned down at Marathon, and there is no exit. At the same time, the Athenians sent a dispatch by Philippides. It's a long run. He has to go 150 miles all the way to Sparta to ask for Spartan reinforcements. The Spartans tell him that given that they are celebrating the Carnia, a very important religious festival in ancient Sparta, they cannot spare any troops, or they cannot dispatch any reinforcements for another 10 days. Now, people tend to give this varying interpretations. First of all, cowardice, forget about it. There's absolutely no reason to even assume that. First of all, because of the fact that the Spartans will never shy out of a fight, and most importantly, because they did send a reinforcement. It arrived about 2 days later than the battle itself, and in fact not being capable of doing anything, but troops were already underway even while the battle was being held. The second one has to do with the fact that the Spartans might have even favored the idea of Athens being destroyed by the Persians. If anything, that I'm sure would not spoil any parties in Sparta. But however, yeah, trust me on that. But however, even at this point, it seems that the survival of Athens, even as a bastion for forward or future Persian expansion, actually made sense or served Spartan interests. The one thing, though, or therefore could in fact give you a definition, is the fact that, yep, indeed, it was a religious festival. It has to do with piety, something that I can assure you that the Spartans took very seriously. If you guys can remember from the famous movie 300, in fact, the Spartans refused to march any troops all the way up to Thermopylae because, once again, it was a celebration of the Carnian.